And it should start any minute now. And there it goes. Oh, excuse me. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Herbalism and More with Ravenwings. I am your host, Ravenwings, and you'll have to bear with me. I have a little bit of a cold, so I'm going to try to get through this easily, but we'll see. The reason that I'm having tonight's show is to teach you all a little about herbs and their storage and shelf life and stuff like that. So for people who want to use the fresh herbs and stuff like that, whether it's in your magic or in your cooking, makes no difference either or. I'm going to teach you some of the ways to use your herbs so that, to store your herbs so that they stay fresher longer. There's a quick version that I'm going to go over first. It's a quick rundown on how to store your herbs for maximum potential shelf life. Yeah, I can speak. I really can. Whenever you get fresh herbs, the first thing you want to do, whether you buy them from the store, whether you pick them out of your garden, whatever the case may be, you want to wash your herbs. You can do that, and you do that with cold water. You can either use a salad spinner or just something where you can put them in a pot and swirl them around and stuff so you can get all the dirt and stuff out of them. And then you want to drain that water. Set a layer of paper towels down or some kind of towel that you can use down and dry the herbs on that. You can blot them to get rid of some of the extra moisture and stuff, but you want to keep them, you really need to be cleaning them because you don't know what's on them. You can store them by arranging them lengthwise in a single layer on a slightly damp paper towel and roll them up like a jelly roll. And then you can transfer that bundle to a plastic bag or wrap it in plastic wrap and store it in your fridge. Tender herbs you can store by snipping off the bases and stems, removing any of the discolored or wilted leaves, and you can take a large mason jar with about 1 inch of water in the bottom and put them inside the mason jar standing up like you would a bouquet of flowers, and then you can put a plastic bag over the top with a rubber band and store in the refrigerator. These are if you're going to use them soon. Basil is one of, I love basil. I make basil every year. I grow basil every year. But this is one of the ones that will wilt and turn nasty and actually will mold if you're not careful. If you're going to be using it soon, you can do the same thing. You snip off the base of them, put it in water, and you can leave them out like a bouquet of flowers. You store them in a light area out of direct sunlight. You can leave them right on your kitchen counter. Oh, excuse me. For regular herbs that you're going to store that are fresh, parsley, this will last about 3 weeks. Cilantro, same thing, 3 weeks. Dill, 2 weeks. Mint, 2 weeks. Tarragon, 3 weeks. Basil, 2 weeks. Thyme, which is a hardy herb, like rosemary, thyme will last 2 weeks, but rosemary will last 3 weeks. And rosemary, just so everyone knows, if you have something that you're doing for a spell, or you're making a puppet or a witch ball or whatever you're making, and you're missing an herb, rosemary is your go-to herb. It's like a white candle for the herbs. It can cover any other herb, so you're all set when you decide to use that. You can substitute with rosemary. And I have no qualms about people who buy seasonings and stuff from the store. Dollar trees, dollar stores are awesome for us frugal witches on a budget. So I can get my herbs and stuff that I need for certain things, especially if I need a lot of one herb. I can get it a lot cheaper by doing it that way. Dried herbs right there. Savory and sage will all last 2 weeks, and chives will last about a week. So you want to, if you're going to use them fresh and you don't want them dried, you want to make sure you use them within a week to 2 weeks time. Excessive exposure to light. This can damage the chlorophyll in the herb, which causes it to turn yellow. So a lot of people wonder why, well, I dried my herbs, but they are not green anymore. They're yellow. And these are especially true for anything that's a real delicate herb, like parsley or cilantro. If you store them in a sunny spot, they will start to turn yellow within days. So with any of the herbs I've found personally, you want to keep them away from sunlight. Even when you store them, you don't want to store them in a clear jar. You can store them in either jars that have an outer coating, or you can wrap paper around them, because I date mine and label them and everything. So, I mean, they have paper wrapped around them. Exposure to oxygen can actually turn herbs like basil or mint brown. It turns them brown. So if you're going to want to, you want to keep them away from oxygen in a sealed way, either in a jar or a bag or whatever you're going to be storing them in. Not enough moisture can also cause herbs to dry out. So if you don't want them to dry out, you want to make sure that there's no moisture. You want to make sure that they have moisture. And also the wrong temperature will cause herbs to decay or lose flavor faster than they should. With the exception of basil and very thin-leafed mint, which can both be damaged by the cold, causing them to turn brown and bruise faster. The fridge is the best place for storing, unlike the back of the top shelf, because it'll cause them to actually freeze in parts, and the ice crystals might cause mushiness, so you want to keep them off to the side a little bit. Let me see. By far, I have to say, the worst method for storing is when you buy them from the supermarket. Within a few days, they'll start to show signs of rotting, and after a couple of weeks, they'll be reduced to slimy, unidentifiable messes at the bottom of a bag if you store them in a bag. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to store them in a bag. Wrapped in a dry paper towel in a Ziploc bag provides the best, most effective for hardy herbs, and upright with water like flowers, or for your more tender herbs like your parsleys and stuff. Let me see. I'm trying to think of what else I want to go over. You can dry them and you can freeze them. Freezing herbs, if you're going to use them for a recipe, let me see if I can use one that's perfect for this, because I love pesto sauce. And what I have done with my basil, if I have a lot of basil, is taken that and pureed it with some oil and some garlic and put it into ice cube trays, and you freeze it in ice cube trays, and then you can take it out and you can put them in Ziploc baggies, and it's great for recipes and stuff like that. However, if you're going to be using herbs and stuff for poppets and stuff like that, you really don't want to use fresh herbs. You want to stay more to the dried herbs, because fresh herbs can actually rot and get mildew and mold and nasty stuff that you really don't want to happen to your herbs. So you're better off using dry herbs. For air drying, you can air dry the herbs. These work well. Wow. I love my computer. These work well for herbs like oregano, and my computer keeps jumping. Go away. I have an ad. Why do I have an ad? What the hey? Bear with me. I'm going to fix this. Pop that over there. Alright, so air drying works well for herbs like oregano, thyme, marjoram, and sage, and especially for people who are making sage sticks and stuff like that. Before you dry them, you want to shake them to remove the dirt and discard any withered leaves. You do not have to wash them if you're going to dry them this way. You just want to make sure that they are clean and you get any kind of buggies or any kind of dirt or anything out of it. You can secure the stems together using a piece of twine or a rubber band, and you want to hang them upside down in a warm, dry, well-ventilated place, away from sunlight. A lot of people use attics. You have to be careful though with attics, because if they get damp, you don't want that. But they need to be in a place where there's a lot of ventilation and stuff, and you just hang them upside down and no sunlight. If you don't have a dark spot, or if dust is a concern, you can cover the bundle with a paper bag. Just make sure there's enough space for air to circulate, and leave them to dry until the leaves crumble away, anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. And you can store them in an airtight container for up to a year, any of those herbs. Oven drying is another method. I don't like it myself. I personally don't like it. I do have a dehydrator, and in some of the herbs that I do, it works great. Some, not so much. So you have to be careful with those as well. But oven drying, it's faster than air drying, and a good option for those who live in a humid climate like Florida. To oven dry, you're going to spread the herbs on a baking sheet lined with wax or parchment paper. And you want to make sure that, you know, the baking sheet you have has that lining, because metal can actually affect the taste of the herbs. You place it in an oven for about 150 degrees Fahrenheit with the door slightly open, so you want to leave your door open a little bit, and you want to check your herbs frequently and remove whenever they're crumbly and stuff. Sometimes it takes anywhere from, depending on the herb, it can take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours. These are also, you know, take them, store them in an airtight container for up to a year. Freezing is the best option for leafy herbs like basil, cilantro, parsley, tarragon. One method will consist of chopping up the herbs and placing them into an ice cube tray. Top them off with broth or water. Another method is to blend the herbs into a paste with a little oil, which is the way I do it, or water before freezing. And you can store those frozen cubes in an airtight container in the freezer for up to 3 months. So those will last up to 3 months. So that's the difference between freezing and stuff. I mean, if you're going to freeze them or you're going to keep them fresh, you're going to have to use them very, very soon. Which is why if you're using these for kitchen witchery, well, we'll say it that way, you're going to basically want to use the dried herbs, because the dried herbs are going to be much easier for you to use and less headache. Let me see, what else did I want to go over here? I have the wrong page. Yep, I do. That's the wrong one. Bear with me. There we go. Oils. Some people like to use flavored or infused oils. These can be made with herbs just like you would a tincture, only you're going to be using an oil instead of an alcohol. They can be used in salads, marinades, sauces, dips, and certain oils can actually be mixed in with different products if you are making a lotion or something like that. Sometimes you can use an infused oil as well in that lotion, depending on how you make them. The primary concern for infused oils is that they can be extremely dangerous and sometimes deadly microorganisms in them, which can cause botulism. So fresh vegetables, herbs, fruit, they all have used to infuse oils can be contaminated with sea bot spores. Fresh produce also contains water, which allows bacteria such as sea bot to live and grow. Sea bot thrives in an oxygen-free environment like oil. That's why flavored and infused oils have to be stored correctly to prevent botulism. You don't want food poisoning from your oil, especially if you're going to be eating this oil. And I have news for everybody. Your skin is one of the biggest organs that you can use, that you have in your body, on your body, and things you touch. And that includes that oil. You can actually get botulism through that oil. This is why I have lupus. Botulism can kill me. I had an iguana. After you handle an iguana, you should always wash your hands. Because if you go to eat a sandwich or something, you can actually have the the botulism on your hands from the iguana's skin itself. So yeah, you want to make sure that you're very careful when you're doing anything like that. When your infused or flavored oils are manufactured commercially, the fresh low acid ingredients are acidified to prevent a bacterial growth. It's particularly important when your oil contains garlic. Garlic is a big one. I don't advise home cooks to try acidic foods. Acidification of food products should be supervised, because this is what they do when they process them. And yeah, I would not even attempt that unless you're in a big factory that you can do that with. But to prepare some flavored infused oils at home, you can start by washing, sanitizing, and thoroughly drying the container and lid of your choice, because you're going to want a container to put this in and a lid. A glass container with a tight-fitting lid is the best. You can use mason jars. You can use, you know, any old jar that you had left over, another glass jar from something else, because I, as a witch, am frugal and I save everything. So yeah, you want to, you know, find the jar that you're looking for, and you want to sanitize it, just like if you were going to be doing some canning. You sanitize your jars before you use them. Same concept. You can sanitize them in boiling water for 30 seconds, and then you remove them from the water, cool, and let them air dry. If you're going to use garlic or herbs, the safest way to make infused oils, you want to add fresh herbs introduced. You want a fresh herb introduced water into an oil, and dangerous bacteria will grow. So you want dried herbs for that. You don't want to use any kind of fresh herbs if you're going to infuse oil. Dried herbs and garlic have no water to the oil, so the bacteria can't grow. You want to use either a good olive oil or another vegetable oil that's a very good oil. And you want to add your flavor additives to a clean container. So once you've cleaned that container, you'll add in whatever herbs you're going to be using, dry herbs you're going to be using, and you're going to heat some oil up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit in a pot. And then what you do is you pour the oil over the dried herbs and then cap your container and cool. Be very careful when capping a container, because you can burn your hand, obviously. And if it's not made, like a canning jar is made for this, if you use another jar that you're not sure of, they can actually explode from the heat. So I advise canning jars are a wonderful thing, and they're not really all that expensive. When you're storing these, you store oil containing dry garlic, vegetables, or herbs, anything like that, in a cool, dark place. That will keep them from the fat in the oil from going rancid. Rancid vegetable oil does not look or smell any different either, so it has been linked to cancer and early aging, so you don't want to store it for more than 3 months. After 3 months, throw away any unused oil. Don't even touch it. 3 months is your limit on infused oils. Flavor in infused oils, if you're going to use fresh ingredients, like garlic or vegetables or herb, they should be acidified using an approved process. This, like I said before, it's very difficult to do unless you're in a big plant to do this. The safest way to do these at home is with dried ingredients. If you do decide to flavor an oil with some fresh stuff, you can use a pH meter. Then what you're going to do is you're going to select a really good quality olive oil. You'll thoroughly wash and dry your fresh ingredients, and garlic should always be chopped up or crushed, and add those cleaned ingredients into a clean container. You'll choose a vinegar with 4 to 5% acidity, and in a pot you want to heat that when near boiling, about 190 degrees. You pour that hot vinegar over your infusion of ingredients. You want to cover that and cool it. Once this mixture has reached room temperature, then you can add your oil and replace the cover. You need enough vinegar so that the finished product has a pH of 4.6 or lower. That keeps that botulism from growing in it. Storage with these, although, you know, I don't advise making oil infusions with fresh additives at home. Those are the kinds you're going to want to refrigerate immediately, because the refrigeration will slow any kind of growth of the bacteria. It will also slow down the oils from going rancid, but after 1 month, throw it away. It's only going to last you 30 days. That's about that on that. Like I said, the other one, if you do it with dried, that one will last a bit longer. But if you do fresh, and I don't suggest, I'll make fresh herbs and oil if I'm going to put it on a salad for that night, and I make a small little bit of it. But I do not make a big thing of it, because I just know that I'm not ever going to use that in time for me to, you know, make it. So another thing I wanted to get into was teas. A lot of fellow witches, people in general, like tea. And much like a good coffee, storage of tea is very important too. And this is the reason I'm going into this, is because a lot of the herbs that we use to make teas and stuff, they need to be stored correctly as well. So you want to avoiding just 5 storage conditions will make a huge difference in the shelf life of your teas. These factors are light, heat, moisture, odor, and air. So if you're cooking fish in the house, you don't want your tea bags right next to the fish, because it will actually absorb the odor of the fish into the tea bags, and your tea is going to taste kind of funny. Light and UV rays will degrade your tea quality very quickly. You want to avoid buying teas from a vendor who stores their teas in clear glass, or in plastic containers that are clear. And you want to avoid storing your tea in any kind of clear container unless you're planning on keeping this in a dark cabinet. If it's not going to be out on the counter or something like that and you have it in a dark cabinet, then that's fine. But if it's out, like when you're buying teas, you go to a health food store. My daughter actually works for a health food store. If you walk in there and their teas are in clear containers, the loose tea has probably lost a lot of its flavor and a lot of its potential just from being exposed to the light and stuff. Heat will also degrade your tea. You want to avoid placing it in the sun, or storing it near like the stove or the oven. Moisture can cause problems too. Tea is shelf stable because it's dry. Oh, I have a kitty cat here, excuse me. It's shelf stable because it's dry, but unfortunately it will absorb water from the air very easily. Just like you see those damp rid containers that you use, tea is the same way. It will absorb water very easily. So you want to make sure that it doesn't until you're ready to brew it. Keep it away from boiling water. Avoid humid areas. Yeah, you just basically want to keep it dry unless you're, you know, making a glass of tea. Storing tea in the fridge is an incredibly common mistake. The only teas that should be stored in a fridge are tightly sealed canisters of Japanese green teas, and those should be consumed very shortly after they're opened, because the fridge can actually create moisture as well. Odor is something that a tea absorbs very easily. This tea trait allows for the creation of amazing scented teas, such as jasmine pearls. It also means that storing your tea near a spice cabinet, trash can, or other source of odor is a no-no. Air exposure also increases the chance that your tea will absorb moisture and odors. So avoid leaving your teas out, sealing it with excess air in the package, or storing it in porous materials like paper bags. Locations. What is with you? What is on your nose? Bear with me. What? What did you do to your nose? Yeah, and this is why we do live shows, because then the cat can climb up on my lap. Location. You want to store your teas, or any of your herbs, basically, especially your dried herbs, far away from anything with a strong odor. Keep them in a dark cabinet, or in a completely opaque container? A dark container. You want to keep delicate teas separate from strongly scented teas. So you don't want to put your chamomile tea in with your peppermint tea, because that chamomile is going to just soak that peppermint right out of it. And you want to avoid storing teas in the humid areas of your kitchen and your house. Don't store them in your bathroom if you have a dryer in there. It gets humid in there, plus showers and everything else. Common sense. It's a lot of common sense. You always want to store teas in a solid container if possible, that doesn't let any light in. Be sure that your packaging is food safe as well. You don't want to use a pencil case to hold your tea. You want to make sure that whatever you're using to hold your tea is actually food safe. Glazed ceramics, non-reactive metals, and opaque Non-leaching plastics all make great packing material for your teas. Wood packaging may be an option, but you want to be aware that many wood containers have odors of their own that can influence the tea's taste. So storing your tea in a wooden box, not always the best of ideas, because I'll use an example, a cedar box. That cedar smell is going to infuse into your tea. Bags that suppliers sell tea in vary widely in terms of quality. For long-term storage, make sure your bags are multiply with an inner layer of foil. It's a substance similar to wax paper. That avoids the contamination by water, air, or grease. So, and also plastic sandwich bags are not a good storage option because they do expose your tea to light, odors, and air. So you don't really want to go with that. A tight seal is key. If the mechanism can hold water, it can protect tea. That's a good way to look at it. Double lids, these are common with metal tea containers. Odor-free silicone seals, also common with metal canisters. And multiply bags with resealable zippers. These will all work as long as they can hold water. It's good for your tea. Another storage tip, if your vendor doesn't use adequate packaging for your tea, you want to resist the urge to continue storing it poorly. Invest in quality packaging for your tea. Your tea will thank you if you do. Buy fresh tea in small quantities. If you live in an area where good tea is hard to find, ask your favorite vendors if they offer shipping. Only open what you can drink in the next few months, unless it's well stored. Don't hold on to teas for years. Drink them when they're at their freshest and best. That's the best time to drink them. So that was a little bit about teas, and it basically works the same way with your herbs and spices and stuff like that. So, and I did want to get into a little more of that. Dried herbs and spices can add a lot of flavor to your dishes if you're using them for cooking. So they're they're readily and easily available and convenient for your use. Plus you can make different things by mixing those spices together. Spices don't spoil, so to speak, over time, but they do lose their strength. And if you store them properly, they'll last longer. Whole peppercorns, nutmegs, cloves, cinnamon sticks, and whole seeds such as coriander, cumin, and cardamom all last longer if they're left whole instead of ground. There are two critical keys to maintaining the optimum flavor and getting the greatest value out of your herbs and spices, and that's to store your spices and seasonings in airtight containers, cool, dark places. Keeping them closed protects them from moisture, oxidation. Keeping them away from direct sunlight keeps the colors from fading. And we've also found that if you store spices in a clear jar, they tend to retain more of their essential oil content. So, no, sorry, glass jar. Sorry, not clear jar, but a glass jar. I try to store everything that I have in glass if possible, because even plastic and over time, certain herbs can actually suck the stuff out of the plastic, so you don't want to go there either. You never want to store your spices above your stove, because the heat will make them degrade a lot quicker. Also, don't store them above your dishwasher, because obviously increased humidity, it shortens their shelf life. Spices do best in temperatures below 70 degrees and in low humidity environments. So you want to keep them away from stoves and sinks and stuff like that. So it may not be as convenient for you while you're cooking, but it will keep the herbs fresher while you're cooking. Some people like to store red spices like chili powder or cayenne pepper and paprika in the fridge. It does more harm than good. You don't really need to store those in there, because what happens is it takes some of that moisture that's in the fridge. It actually will suck in some of the moisture that's in the fridge. Whole spices will keep the longest that have not been cracked or ground, like the seeds that I was talking about. So, like, shelf life That's the other thing I wanted to get into. If your spices and herbs are kept correctly, like we've discussed, like I've talked about, the shelf life will be as follows: a whole spice, dried herb, leaves, and flowers. Those type of herbs and spices will keep from 1 to 2 years, depending on what they are when they're dried. Seeds will keep 2 to 3 years. Whole roots, like ginger root or yallinger root, those will keep for 3 years. Ground spices and herbs, you want to keep those for about a year. And ground roots, if you're going to grind the roots up, 2 years. So, and just because a spice or a seasoning blend is outside the date range listed, doesn't mean that the spice needs to be tossed in the trash. You can determine if a spice or seasoning is still good just by looking at the appearance, smelling the aroma. If a spice no longer has the vibrant color and it's faded, or you just don't smell what it's supposed to smell like, then it's probably time to pitch that one and get a new one. They don't just all of a sudden go good from one day and bad to the next. It's not like, okay, my milk was good yesterday, it's not good today. It's not the same thing. So, but you want to do is prolong them by storing them, the proper way. A good overall practice would be to purchase high quality dry herbs and spices from reliable suppliers in small quantities, so that you can easily use them up in a reasonable period of time. You don't want to, go out and buy this big container of parsley flakes if this is not something that you use a lot of, or mint or dill. You don't want to have it in a big container if it's not something that you're going to be using a lot of the time. And then I'm just going to go over, we're going to probably have a little bit of a short show today because my throat really does hurt. I wanted to go over 5 ingredients that won't expire on your spice rack shelf. Oh, excuse me. I am so sorry. Let me see. I want to know where to start this. Okay. General guidelines, so you can know how long you can expect various seasonings and spices to last. For ground spices, like I said, they can last anywhere between 3 to 4 years, depending on, these are store-bought now. I'm going to use these as store-bought, not fresh herbs. They can last anywhere from 3 to 4 years. Leafy herbs, on the other hand, can only last for about 1 to 3 years, depending on what they are. Whole spices can stick around for 4 years, and the same is true for all extracts except vanilla, which I'll get into more later. A bottled seasoning blend is okay for 1 to 2 years, and the same goes for marinades and sauces, the marinade rubs and stuff like that. All the stuff you're going to make mix it into something liquid. Recipe mixes aren't bad until 2 years later. It's about the same as seafood mixes and stuff. Fresh spices will only be good for about a week, unless it's garlic. Fresh garlic can be kept up to 4 to 6 months before it's time to get a new batch. Like I said, tight sealed container, dark places. Color is a decent way of testing your spices for freshness, like I said. You want to check color. You want to check if they're leafy, if they're still green, or if they've turned to brown. The aroma should still be strong if your spice is good. So you want to make sure that that is all part of that when you're working with your herbs and stuff. Baking soda and baking powder, if you're going to use these for cooking, because as witches we do cook. We actually do cook, and they say that 3 years for your baking soda is the basis for, okay, I've had it for 3 years, time to throw it away. You want to make sure you go with that. Baking soda will lose its power over time, and its potency is affected by how you store it as well. So to test the strength of a baking soda, to see if it's still good, you can take a 1/4 cup of baking soda, add 4 tablespoons of vinegar. If it begins to bubble immediately, your baking soda is still good. If it doesn't, pitch that, because it's no good anymore. Unlike baking soda, baking powder, which helps baked good rise and stuff and gives it a lighter texture, has a much shorter shelf life. And I'm sure a lot of people didn't know this, and I didn't know this. 6 months to 1 year after opening, you should get new baking powder. It will, as soon as it's open, moisture begins to seep in, and it loses, it starts taking the ability of the product and decreasing it. So yeah, baking powder you want to replace often. There are some non-expiring things. One example is pure vanilla. Pure vanilla extract has a shelf life that has no expiration date if you're using pure vanilla. We're not talking imitation vanilla, and anybody who cooks and uses vanilla should not be using imitation vanilla anyway. You want to use pure vanilla. And this, you can keep it forever. It's like a bottle of wine. It will last forever. Sugar is another thing. It does not support microbial growth, which means that as long as it's stored properly, it will last forever. Brown sugar and powdered sugar are best used within 2 years, but regular white, you know, like Domino's sugar, yeah, that is another one. As long as it's stored correctly, it lasts forever. And just because brown sugar is hardened doesn't mean it's gone bad. It just needs to be softened. And you can do that in a microwave. And you can, another thing to do with brown sugar to keep it soft is to put a little bit of bread in with it. Like a slice of bread. Take a half slice of bread. Just make sure you keep checking that bread, because if that bread starts to mold, you're going to have to throw the whole thing away. So you want to make sure that that bread doesn't harden. So, and it will help you with that as well. Honey is another ingredient that just doesn't go bad. Honey is just, they've found honey from Egyptian period way back when Cleopatra was around, and it's still good. So cornstarch is another one. You can keep cornstarch forever. That's another one. And salt, which is a witch's go-to as well. Salt, regular old salt, will not expire. Iodinized salt lasts about 5 years, but regular salt doesn't expire. So just wanted to go over a few of those things with you on that. Oh, excuse me. So yeah, those are some of the things you really don't have to worry about. So where is, I thought it was this one that I wanted to go over, but I could be wrong. I could very well be wrong. I will have one show where I talk about how to grow herbs and stuff like that, the easiest ways. And I live in Maine, so, you know, our growing period is very short. We're lucky when we get spring to get the stuff planted in the garden, let alone, you know, trying to get it to grow quickly and end up being able to harvest it in time before, you know, the frost starts to hit. So, I mean, I've learned how to grow a lot of the inside herbs, the kitchen herbs that I use if I need them fresh and stuff for cooking or whatever the case may be, or drying them out. I've learned how to grow them inside. So I'm gonna go over a bunch of that with you guys too, when it comes to the herbs and stuff like that. I'm trying to think. I think that about covers it for tonight. Next week, providing, you know, my voice will actually stay, I want to get into more of the tinctures and decoctions and stuff like that, and start covering how to make them and different things that they can be used for. So that's the plan for next week. So I'm sorry it was a short show tonight. But my throat just does not want to cooperate with me this evening, so I'm gonna go grab a hot cup of tea and see if that helps. But I want to thank you all for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. You can email me at ravenwings1369@gmail.com. You can message me through the YouTube. You can message me through Facebook. It's Herbalism and More with Ravenwings. That is the group to join in Facebook. I also have a personal persona page called Ravenwings. You can hit me up there with questions and stuff like that too. So I want to thank you all for joining me, and I hope you have a great night.